Oh, what does it mean to fit a scheme? To fill a need, to dream a dream, the raw and green, the long and lean. What could it mean if they fit a scheme?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, every single day. My hashtag everydayers. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today is Townhall Tuesday. That means I am taking your questions and evaluating your hot takes. There are a couple of scorchers in here later in the show, ranging from the totally insane to the believable that you believe that, but oh my God. But first, we're going to start with some questions. If you ever have any questions or you just want to confess a hot take anonymously, you can submit them via the Google form in the show notes, whether it's a question or a hot take, or you can just send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, and I'll just reply to you directly if you'd rather do that. The first question I am going to answer comes from W, who says, how important is scheme fit in the draft? Is it uncommon for players that are not a scheme fit to work out? Uncommon, no. The thing about the draft is there are no hard and fast rules. Everything can happen, right? You can be like, I don't think he's a scheme fit. For example, I didn't think Jordan Addison was a scheme fit for the Vikings. That has been working out fine, mostly because I thought Kevin O'Connell prioritized blocking so much that he wouldn't even look at a small receiver that can't really block. But they actually do just ask Jordan Addison to block. They just are okay with it, with him losing it a little bit. They just think that that's worth it for everything else that he does. And I think they're pretty right. So yeah, it can work out. The thing about scheme fit for me is like pursuant to the answer to a different question. The question you're really asking is, how much do I need to change about this player before he fits what I'm going to ask him to do? Scheme fit to me isn't like a thing you should score on a scale of 1 to 10. What's his scheme fit? It's more that it's context. And much like with the conversation that I had with Savon Rebel, and not letting the context become the player, not letting the context become the evaluation. It needs to inform the evaluation, not become the evaluation itself. And I think scheme fit is another one of those things. So put it this way: what am I going to ask this guy to do? I think that's a better way to ask about scheme fit. If I'm Brian Flores and I'm thinking about drafting a defensive back, what am I going to ask that defensive back to do? And can he do those things? That's sort of a roundabout way of asking about scheme fit, but also that stops you from putting your scheme in a box. You think about what's a scheme fit for Brian Flores's defense, in an edge rusher. Okay. Well, it's got to be very classic, like 3-4 outside linebacker. You want him to be able to back off and cover, right? You're probably looking for someone like long and lanky. You're looking for like Dallas Turner types, right? What if you ran into a short edge rusher, but could do all the things? Well, you probably should be fine with that, right? Even if he's a little bit shorter, but he can still, contain on the edge. He can still crash down on a stun. He can still drop into coverage, do all the things you want him to do. He just isn't the like prototype you usually envision for that kind of guy. You should still probably be pretty open to that idea. So instead, ask about tasks, ask about jobs, not positions, but jobs. I need a guy that can do thing A, B, and C. For an edge rusher, I need you to be able to execute a stunt. I need you to be able to hammer down on a puller that's coming across the field. I need you to be able to, yes, one-on-one rush, but be disciplined about contain when it's important. And those guys are going to be the guys that are better scheme fits than ones who maybe aren't necessarily like that, or guys that are all totally, completely about, the one-on-one flashy pass rush that don't have that same versatility. That's not going to be a scheme fit. So in terms of historically, yeah, like I think if they're not a scheme fit and they worked out, it means they either became one or you were being too narrow about what you actually call a scheme fit. Bradley Knorr says, I've heard that a lot of people view picks 10 to 50 as being a similar tier. I would agree with that. I think that's a pretty apt description of this class. I think once you get past the like super blue chip guys, it's a lot of just a guys, you know, it's a lot of like rotational players, or maybe not even rotational players. That's maybe too mean, but you know, kind of 2/3 of the snaps kind of guys. Given that, would it be reasonable to expect a lower valued trade than expected, like the 2022 trade down was viewed? That was a fairly poor draft class too. Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good call. Or just no trade down at all. Again, like I'm going to kind of say this all year. I'm with you all. I would love a trade down. I think a trade down is honestly the best outcome because of how flat I think the draft is. Once you get past like pick 10, you might as well get more bites at that apple, because I don't think going from pick 20 to pick 40 is going to get you that much worse of a guy. I just think the value is totally fine. And it's just the nature of this class. But if we're all right and we all agree on this, why would another team want to come up from 40 to 20? Like for who? For why? What would they want? We need NFL teams to disagree with us, and we also need to be right over those NFL teams. So it could backfire, right? But I think that's going to make it really hard to pull off a trade down. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Vikings just, all right, well, clock's running out. Nobody made a deal with us. Let's just pick whoever's at the top of our board. Blimby asks, what changes do you think should be made to try to have less nepotism in the coaching ranks? That's a pretty tough one, man. The problem is, so the obvious cases of nepotism, of like somebody hiring their son, I think if you did like truly outlaw that, it probably would do more good than harm, if you ask me. If you made it so like, okay, Gary Kubiak can't hire Clint Kubiak. He can recommend Clint Kubiak for someone else's job, and that's still a case of nepotism, but it's one that I think is a lot harder to enforce and maybe even more unfair, just because Clint Kubiak is Gary Kubiak's kid. Does that mean he can't work in the NFL? That feels like you've gone too far the other way, right? But I think a requirement for like good faith interview processes where like, okay, Clint Kubiak is a candidate for this job, but I am going to actually talk to some other people, and a better enforcement of those that hopefully would make that kind of thing work better than like the Rooney Rule, where like John Elway can show up drunk to a meeting with Brian Flores. That was in his lawsuit, right? Or hungover, sorry, and like not like clearly not really care about it. Like you don't necessarily want that to be, you're just kind of encouraging that with just like a blanket Rooney Rule. You kind of have to have some measure to like ensure good faith. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not a contracts lawyer, nor am I a union representative, but I do think that some kind of like, honestly, yeah, like an organization of coaches would probably have to also be part of that. And right now there is no organization like that. So that would be a tough one. In terms of like how people in the past and in other industries have tried to fight nepotism, a lot of it is in trying to reform the actual interview, hiring, and like research process for those things, like, you know, blind resumes, things like more comprehensive interview processes that point stuff out, where the more you learn about somebody's fail son, the harder it's going to be to hire them anyway when you learn about all the bad things. And if you don't learn about any bad things, well, great, you can hire them, but now it kind of feels like they earned it. So probably the answer lies in there, but I'm going to be honest, you're asking the wrong podcaster for like a comprehensive idea. And I'm sure that there's somebody who's like spent a long time like working for some kind of like union, especially like a contractors union, like something that you would see out in like a film industry in LA, that probably has better ideas about that. But the next one comes from B-Dog, who asks, the archetype of pro athletes that's more of a 9-to-5 guy who may be incredibly gifted but doesn't have the insane passion for the sport and sees it truly as just a job. Who are some of the most talented Vikings to fit this mold? There have been jokes revealing that Trey Waynes was just an avid outdoorsman who happened to play football. Yeah, Trey Waynes has like a bait and tackle store in Wisconsin now and is living like his best life. And his dedication to football, not that he wasn't a dedicated football player, but yeah, it was kind of just a chapter for him. I think the most famous example, and probably the only one that I need to mention right now, is Alan Page. Alan Page very famously saw football as just another thing to excel at. And, during football, he got his law degree and he went into law, and then he did the state Supreme Court in Minnesota, and was involved in, strikes and reforms and stuff in the 70s. He did all kinds of other things on top of football. And to him, football was just another thing. He didn't ever really get, he would get confused when someone would ask him for his autograph. He didn't really get the pomp and circumstance of it all, where you talk to a player today and being the football player means you're someone. It turns you into someone. And Alan Page very actively refused to define himself as that. And it's one of the reasons that I admire him so much. I have a whole bunch more questions. I have spent way too much time. So we're going to try to rapid fire some of them next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by Chewy, who has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. This household has been a Chewy household for years, ever since we got the lovely rabbits that love to predict the games. And so they actually just sent us a whole bunch of their favorite toys. You can get all kinds of stuff from this is our rabbits' favorites. This is just what we know that they love. A whole bunch of wicker. They love wicker stuff. They usually just tear it apart and eat it. And then these little dumbbell shaped balls of compressed hay that they love to tear apart, which is what you're being treated to right now if you're watching on YouTube. They have over 100,000 products, so whatever your pet loves, they are going to have it, and it makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. Plus, they have their auto ship. Our rabbits go through a ton of hay. They go through 4 times their body's volume in hay every week. So having auto ship ready so that I am always good, I can never forget to get a shipment, is absolutely a necessity. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast, Townhall Tuesday. The next one comes from Chris, who asks, it seems like the Vikings are set to have our starting cornerbacks be Byron, Rodgers, and Mekhi Blackman. What are your thoughts about Mekhi Blackman? Did you like what you saw from him his rookie season? And could we get a potential Patreon video breakdown? Probably not on a Patreon till we get 2025 tape. And then if he does play and if there's anything interesting, I'll do that. But right now, Patreon is very much focused on the draft. But the patreon.com/LukeBryan NFL, plug. My opinion on Mekhi coming out was, so he was really, really good at the shuffle step, the 45-degree shuffle step. If I recall, that was his move. He would always start with a shuffle step. A lot of cornerback coaches will teach that the shuffle step is a very versatile thing. It's at a 45-degree angle. You can break down, you can turn and bail, and it really helps you. There's a couple of specific ways to beat it, but it's nice as a go-to fastball. And what I wanted was for him to get a little bit more comfortable with backpedaling and with other tools so that he was ready for a higher repertoire of situations. And they started to do that with him his rookie year, but it was clear that he was new to those footwork. So sometimes he would get beat, but I thought he played pretty well for a rookie, especially for a day 2 rookie. Or was he day 3? He was the start around 4, wasn't he? So either way, I absolutely was fine with that as a rotational corner. I want to see some improvement from him before I'm good with giving him a full on starting job. And that could mean, put a rookie in the room and let him beat that rookie, even if that's somebody we take at pick 97, right? Or somewhere in day 2 if they trade down. Shy Guy asks, wondering how post-June 1st cuts work in practice. I know you can designate someone as a post-June 1st cut so they can negotiate with other teams ahead of time, but does that player have to wait until after June 1st to access the team facilities and participate in OTAs or other such team events? No, in practice, it's exactly the same as a regular free agent. The only change is how these things get counted on the salary cap. And that was actually a deal that was made specifically for this thing. Because it was designated in the CBA that June 1st is the day that it's now too close to the regular season for for certain cap calculations, where think about it more middle of the regular season, right? Let's say that you had a player that was making $10 million and you wanted to, game the system. You could cut them mid-season and, save a whole bunch of that money right on that year's cap, and it would be kind of like awkward. And so it kind of just locks in whatever you've done with those contracts and essentially promises that, hey, if this person gets cut or whatever, we're going to square it all away on next year's cap, and we'll kind of figure out the bill there. We'll balance the checkbook, if you will. And then people realize that that could be advantageous to, push a little bit of money into next year or whatever. It was a useful trick. But you wouldn't want people to keep to keep players they're going to cut on the roster till June 1st just for the contract of it all, and like keep those guys from finding their new thing. So it was agreed upon that, okay, we'll just let this happen. You can do the salary stuff forever or however you want to do it, but you got to let that guy go find his new team. And that seems fine with everybody. So yeah, they can go practice. They can go be in the team facility, do whatever. They're functionally no different than a free agent. It's just that the money works differently, and the money is not available to the team that cut him until after June 1st. You can't cut somebody June 1st and then turn around and spend that money on a free agent in March. You have to wait until after June 1st, which is one of the big disadvantages. Alan asks, what do you think of a toilet bowl style tournament for the first 4 picks in the draft? 2 rounds, bottom 4 teams, winner gets pick 1, runner up 2, and so on. Look, I get it. Okay. I get that everybody wants this like solution for the specter of like, what if you lose on purpose to get the first overall pick? But I think we have mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence that practically there is no need for this in the NFL. It is not the NBA. There are way less quitters, in the NFL than the NBA. The NBA has a genuine, like really bad problem for this. And I think a toilet bowl for the NBA would actually be better than a lottery. Because it would be just enough reason to keep somebody from like trading away all their players at the deadline and then like subjecting their fans to 30 games at the end of the year where they aren't trying at all. It's just really bad business, right? For the NFL, because there's so many fewer games, and because the trade deadline happens so much earlier in the season, so that, by week 8, nobody has quit on their season, right? Everybody thinks, but maybe we could make a run, right? What if we went on a streak? Even if you're, 1-7, you go, I don't know, but we could be 10-7. Like you tell yourself that, right? So the need for this does not exist, okay? It is totally fine to just have the worst team get the first overall pick and the second worst team get the second overall pick and so on. You see every single year in week 18, you see teams winning meaningless games, trying to win meaningless games. But basically every year there's a like Lovie Smith winning the stupid game so that they go 4th instead of 2nd or whatever it was. Basically happens every year, so it's fine. The problem with the toilet bowl idea, though, it would be superior to a lottery, and if it was like the NBA, that's fine, is that making players play 2 extra games is insane, and the union would never go for it. The union would immediately kibosh that idea. They would never even bring it to the table. Alan Page's perfectly pointy, impossibly perpendicular pinky says, what is the worst aspect of Justin Jefferson's game? Is something he can work on to improve on the offseason, or is it something he's stuck with like a physical limitation? I don't know why you why you want to like hone in on like anything like that. The thing about Justin Jefferson is so much of his game is so polished that to find a true negative, you have to be pretty niche. There isn't like here's his Achilles heel thing. I feel it's a little like nice try, Packers defensive coordinator. Packers DB's coach Jerry Gray, like good try. But I think the knock that he had coming out, and maybe the one thing that people have been able to use to get lesser games out of him, is physicality, right? Like he is a leaner player. He's not, this big bully. It's like a key difference between him and Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is a bigger player that's going to, shove guys off of him and be a little bit more difficult to disrupt in the middle of a route stem. You can disrupt Justin Jefferson a little bit in a route stem. He's got a million tools to overcome this, and he always has. So it's not like a huge deal, but that's why teams that have, held Justin Jefferson to the fewest yards, a lot of times that has also come with a ton of untimely penalties and a game that you're ultimately not even really happy with. If you want to mug him and throw him around, that's kind of the way to screw up his game, which is very detailed, and therefore it's very delicate. Those tiny little details and nuances that he uses in his route running to like trick people, all great. But if you throw the timing of them off, they can become a lot less effective, but you got to do so without getting a flag. So the weakness is one that is like not that easy to take advantage of. Kevin, I don't think this is Kevin, says, why do people think the Vikings hate small school players when there's no sample of them passing up small school guys early in the draft that actually made sense? I will just point you to Forno Friday. Last week, we actually debated about exactly that. That the Vikings don't, or Kwesi. So Andrew Berry has a thing about a group of 5 schools that he doesn't really draft them, or doesn't really draft them highly. And so Tyler posited that Kwesi would have the same idea. There's only one real example of that I would point to, that I would see as an example of that. And one example does not a pattern make, but it's the Vikings trading up for Dallas Turner instead of staying put and drafting Quinyon Mitchell. But they were clearly interested in Mitchell. They brought him in for a top 30. Who knows where they had him on their board? They probably just had Dallas Turner a lot higher on the board. So I don't think that that's a rejection of a small school player necessarily. Another Kevin, who is, I don't think Kevin says, would you rather have Will Campbell or Marcus Mbo as an NFL tackle? We were all watching NFL tape together earlier, right before I recorded this. And Marcus Mbo is the weirdest player I've ever watched. It's, I'm just going to table it. Okay. We'll get around to it. Because some people want the Vikings to draft him and move him to guard or whatever. I don't think that's I don't think that's going to solve the problem you think it's going to solve. And Will Campbell, to me, I think is heavily overrated. I don't care about this question. Fries Tibia asks the last question, then we'll get into the hot takes. He says the last episode of White Lotus is called Amore Fati. Is this a bad omen or what? Amore Fati, if you are unfamiliar, is what JJ McCarthy tweeted after he got hurt. After he learned that he'd be out for the season with the meniscus injury. It's a Latin phrase that translates roughly to love where you are. It kind of means to embrace the be where your feet are kind of thing. Embrace the life that you have. And that is a phrase that has resonated with me a lot. I love that phrase. That was the first time I had heard it, was when JJ McCarthy tweeted it out, and I was like, oh, that's really pretty. I actually really like that. But it also is very thematic to the end of White Lotus, I guess. Okay, hot takes coming up next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings are brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bet if your bet wins. So put a $5 money line down on a Thunder game that they're going to win. And assuming that you're right, you can get 50-1 odds on that Thunder game, no matter what the money line actually is set at. FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking a favorite or an underdog or a 3-point prop for Anthony Edwards or whatever you want to do. They have so many ways to bet all of your favorite players and get a little bit of extra action in on a game. If you don't care who actually is going to win, you can give yourself a reason to. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay right there on the fly for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, it is time for your scalding, scorching, sizzling hot takes on the Locked On Vikings podcast. I love this part. I love the weird takes that I get. The first one is very long. It's from Sporty Spice, who says that Kwesi has been the luckiest GM in the league. The 4 examples that Sporty Spice gives are: 1, Kevin O'Connell is hired, best coach of the 10 hired that year. Only O'Connell, Dable, and McDaniel remain, and O'Connell is both of the other 2 guys are kind of on the hot seat, I guess. 2, needs an off ramp from Kirk and gets it as exactly the right time, citing his Achilles tear coming right at the time when you needed an excuse, a reason to get out of there. They were headed for an above 500 record that would have kept Kirk here, so that was a stroke of luck, I guess, according to Sporty Spice. 3, Kwesi inherits elite talent at premium positions in JJ, Darrisaw, and Hunter. And 4, the Vikings are revealed as a destination for free agency. First NFLPA report card released in 2023. He's been a fine GM, but boy, the most important breaks have all gone his way. Okay, I know it's the hot take segment, so I respect you. Okay, Sporty Spice, I respect your bold opinions. You are so wrong. I'm so sorry. You are so unbelievably wrong. But I respect that you put your wrong take exactly where it goes. So for one, hiring KOC was a decision Kwesi made. That is not a stroke of luck. That was like a heavily vetted process, and they made the correct decision. That's you're crediting Kwesi for doing something. Calling him lucky for doing that would be like calling him lucky for drafting a good player. Like, no, he did that. Needing an off-ramp from Kirk Cousins and getting lucky with the Achilles injury, I think you're insane to call a quarterback injury that tanks the only non-playoffs, that causes the only non-playoff season Kwesi has presided over, as a lucky thing. That is actually an incredibly unlucky thing that muddied that whole situation. I also firmly believe that they were going to let him walk anyways. They signed him to a 2-year extension when Kwesi first got here. He played that 2 years and he walked. I think the perception that any part of that plan changed over the middle of it was just getting caught up in being a prisoner in those moments. Number 3, he inherited a little bit of elite talent. I'll give you JJ and Darisaw. He did let Hunter go. So, there were 2 good players on the team when he got here. I don't feel like that's inheriting like this perfectly made roster. I think there were 2 players. He had to build the rest around it. And the Vikings being a destination for free agency with the like NFLPA report card and stuff. I think the GM can have part to do with that because of like his influence on the business side, but I will for the most part give you that one. So I'll give you 1 of 4, and yeah, that's 1 and 3 ain't good enough. Testing Data Purist says, I do not care about a prospect's relative athletic score if they did not run the agility drills. Players who don't run those are likely hiding something. Maybe. One thing I will get, so I'm not going to tell you you're super wrong or anything like that, but I will give you one piece of context that might be important, which is that at the combine, the turf was different than anything these guys were. They just changed like the turf at Lucas Oil Stadium. And I don't think we have a great sense for how that change is going to change people's times compared to their historical peers. And so where your 3-cone will rank might go down because of the turf, and people might not want to subject themselves to that. But that's all very, those are mights and maybes and perhapses. So I think you have to look into it on an individual level and look at like, okay, why did they not do the agility drill? Are they not necessarily that agile of a player? I just did a big Patreon video on Nick Emenwari, and I think that might actually be the case, that he maybe wouldn't have done that well in the 3-cone, so he didn't run it. But other people didn't run the 3-cone that maybe would have done well and are like going to do it at their pro day or something like that. Ryan Grigson Superfan says Ryan Grigson has basically been running the team the last few years, which is why we've seen better draft and free agency selections than we did in 2022 with Kwesi, and why the Wills haven't extended Kwesi yet, because they know they could promote Grigson after the next year. So I think I know where you got this idea. It's from a Mike Sando article at The Athletic. Mike Sando does a lot of articles that are like, if you've seen the ones that are like, we asked, anonymous NFL executives about all 32 teams, and here's what they have to say, unfiltered. It's that kind of stuff. And in one of them, somebody was like, well, I know they got Ryan Grigson over there. It's weird that they haven't, extended Kwesi yet. I wonder if they're going to fire him and promote Ryan Grigson. And it was very much just a guy speculating. It was not a guy speaking from any sort of experience. It wasn't a guy saying, here's what the buzz is. Here's what I've heard. He was going, I don't know. I don't really know what's going on over there. Are they doing this? Like, it was clearly somebody that's not paying attention to the Vikings at all. And why would you? You work for an NFL team. You're probably a little too busy to keep up with another random team. So I want to make it clear that if you saw that, that's not a report. That's speculation from somebody whose connection to the team we do not even know if there is one. Good hot take. I don't think you're right at all. Something very publicly changed after the 2022 draft, which was that they fired all of the scouts. I'm gonna guess that had something to do with the draft, not some secret shadow government run by Ryan Grigson. I think we can Occam's razor this one. Why Kevin says, has 2. 1, the reason Kwesi doesn't have a deal yet is because he's mulling a career move to run an NBA team or a giant hedge fund. Sure, giant hedge fund, love it. 2, chess piece is a terrible metaphor for a football player. A pawn is a chess piece. Let's ban the word and try better. True, Cook. Yeah, chess piece, it means a versatile thing, which is also chess pieces are very famously not versatile. They always do the same thing. They don't have different jobs. The chess pieces all have the same job every single time. But I get it. Want somebody you can use strategically, right? Yeah, I'm with you. I think like moratorium on a lot of different like sports phrases, moratorium on articles titled "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly." You can do better. Okay. That the reference is old. Finally, the real Kevin says prime Drew Brees was better than Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. And I don't really think it's particularly close. This take is bad enough that I do think it's the real Kevin. Which I'm not going to protect your anonymity on this one, Kevin. I'm gonna hang you right out to dry on this one. Okay. That's insane. That's completely insane. Drew Brees, very much a Sean Payton merchant, had a couple of years that were much better than the rest. He got a lot of volume stuff because he played for a long time, but to say he was better than Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, I'm sorry. You would never, those teams would never make that trade. Ever, ever, ever. And I think if the Saints in like 2010 could have traded Drew Brees for Tom Brady, they're doing it. I'm sorry, they're doing it. Yeah, you're insane. But that's why I love the hot take segment. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.